Natalie Renner had everything that could glitter in the world. A tech empire worth $5.8 billion, a penthouse overlooking all of Manhattan, and enough luxury to make headlines weekly. Yet, inside her chest, her heart felt like it was being gnawed at by invisible teeth. Widowed young, with 3 daughters born minutes apart, triplets, Natalie wasn't just parenting alone. She was battling guilt, grief, and chaos in triplicate. Her daughters, Ivy, Isla, and Imogen, were 6 years old and bursting with unmatched energy, fierce independence, and an unshakable pact of sisterhood that made discipline almost impossible. They weren't bad kids, they were brilliant, funny, and deeply bonded, but they were exhausting. One could paint an entire wall with ketchup in under 4 minutes. The second could rewire a baby monitor into a walkie-talkie, and the third had recently taught herself how to use Alexa to order glitter bombs. In less than 2 years. 12 nannies had come and gone. Natalie had tried everything. Montessori-trained caregivers, military veterans, even a former child psychologist turned domestic consultant. They all lasted a week, some barely a day. The triplets were clever, united, and relentlessly mischievous. Natalie couldn't blame them for needing attention. Their father had died in a car crash just months after their birth. But she was drowning. Her assistant, Rhonda, hesitated before knocking on her glass office door. Yes? Natalie didn't look up from her tablet. She hadn't slept the night before. There's one more applicant for the nanny position, Natalie sighed. Didn't the last one quit by text at 3 a.m. from the airport? Rhonda nodded uncomfortably. This one's unconventional. Natalie finally looked up. Unconventional how? He's a janitor. Natalie blinked. Excuse me? He works here. At the building, floor 19, his name's Ezra, single dad. No formal training, but he asked to be considered. He said, and I quote, I raised 1 wild daughter. I think I can handle 3. Natalie should have laughed. Instead, something inside her tilted. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe desperation. Send him in, she said, almost against her own instincts. Ezra Delgado was not what she expected. He wasn't timid or overeager. He walked in with quiet confidence, hands calloused from years of labor. He had kind eyes, a strong build, and an unmistakable aura of calm. Not polished, not professional, but grounded. His faded uniform still smelled faintly of cleaning solution. You know I'm not qualified, right? He said immediately, standing before her desk. I assumed. Natalie replied dryly, but I've raised a daughter on my own since she was 4. She's 15 now. And she used to light bugs on fire with a magnifying glass just to see how long they'd dance. Natalie didn't laugh, but her lip twitched. I'm not asking for a career, I'm asking for a chance. 1 week? You don't pay me unless it works? She blinked. That's a bold offer. I know what kids like them are really saying. Ezra continued. They don't want to drive people away. They just want to know someone won't run. That line lodged itself in Natalie's throat. You have 1 week, she said. But I'm not playing games. My daughters are complicated. He smiled. So was mine. From the first moment Ezra stepped into the penthouse, the triplets tried to test him. They smeared peanut butter on his shoes, rigged a toy spider to drop from the ceiling fan, and even locked themselves in the pantry chanting, "No grown-ups." Aloud, in unison, Ezra didn't flinch. He didn't yell. He didn't bribe or bargain. He sat outside the pantry door and said, I brought marshmallows. I was going to make s'mores and watch cartoons. But hey, I'll do it alone. 10 minutes later, the pantry opened. That night, Natalie came home early and peeked in to see her triplets sitting in a blanket fort made of couch cushions. Ezra reading the BFG out loud, his voice animated, the girls leaning on him like sleepy kittens. It took her breath away. The days that followed weren't perfect, but they were better. Ezra had a gift. He didn't overpower the girls. He understood rhythm, patience, and presence. He taught them to plant succulents in cups. He let them mix pancake batter and taught them how to clean up afterward. He never used his phone in front of them. One day, when Ivy threw a tantrum over a broken crayon, Ezra didn't scold. He crouched beside her and said, That's how I felt when my dog ran away when I was little. Like something small mattered too much, Ivy stopped crying. She climbed into his lap. Natalie watched from the hallway and felt something shatter gently inside her. One evening, after a long investor meeting, Natalie returned to find the lights low, the kitchen clean, and her daughters all asleep in a giant sleeping bag. Ezra had stitched together from old comforters. She found him on the balcony, sipping tea from a chipped mug. "They're happy," she said quietly. He nodded, not needing thanks. "How did you do it?" she asked. "No one else even made it past Tuesday." Ezra looked out at the skyline. "Because I've been where they are. I lost someone too. My wife died of cancer when my daughter was just a toddler. I know what it's like to feel abandoned by the world. And I know what kids need most isn't perfection, it's presence." Natalie's eyes welled with tears. She hadn't cried in years. "Not properly. They don't need a hero," he added softly. "They need someone who stays." But not everyone was happy with the arrangement. Rhonda brought her concerns. "Ma'am, he's a janitor. You're a public figure. There's already buzz. Headlines like 'Billionaire Mom Hires Custodian as Nanny' don't look great for PR." Natalie looked her dead in the eye. "If those headlines keep my girls from feeling abandoned again, I'll plaster them on billboards." Ezra's 1 week turned into 2, then 3, one night. The girls insisted he sit at the dinner table with them instead of the staff kitchen. "Your family," Isla said. Natalie didn't object. She found herself looking forward to those meals, to the sound of giggles, to the way Ezra asked about her day without any pretense. One night after everyone had gone to bed, Natalie stood in the living room alone and whispered, "Thank you," to no one in particular, because something was changing. Not just the girls. 3 months later, the headlines hadn't stopped, but neither had the healing. Natalie had stopped caring about appearances. The media called her impulsive, eccentric, even unhinged. She used to draft statements and PR responses in her head, but now, when the tabloids swarmed her at events asking, "Is it true you hired a janitor to raise your children?" she simply smiled. "They weren't being raised," she said once to a camera. "They were surviving. Ezra taught them to live." By then, Ezra had become more than the girls' guide. He'd become their anchor. They no longer woke up in tantrums or screamed at the housekeeper or cried themselves sleep. Instead, Ivy wrote a song on Ezra's old guitar. Imogen built a Lego palace with working lights. And Isla started writing letters to her late father that she slipped under her pillow. Ezra never invaded their grief. He simply made space for it. One Friday morning, Natalie overheard something that sent a lump through her throat. The girls were whispering in their room before school. "I hope Ezra stays forever," Ivy said. "Maybe if Mommy marries him, he won't leave," Isla added. "She won't," Imogen whispered sadly. "She doesn't smile like that at anyone." Natalie closed the door quietly. She had come to depend on Ezra in ways she never expected. Not just as a caretaker, but as a presence, a voice that cut through her spirals, a stillness in the noise of her world. When board meetings ended in chaos or when markets dipped overnight, she'd find him on the balcony, calm, steady, and feel something deeper than gratitude. But she didn't dare cross that line. Not again, not after losing the first man she'd loved. Then came the gala night. Natalie was scheduled to host a charity gala, an annual black tie affair meant to dazzle investors and secure 7-figure donations for her tech education fund. She wore a silver gown, custom-made and stunning, but her daughters clung to her dress hem like shadows. "They're not ready to be left with a sitter," Ezra said gently as Natalie put on her earrings. "I can stay with them here." "Make it a movie night." Natalie hesitated. Then Ivy blurted, "Can Ezra come with us?" Natalie paused. She looked at Ezra. Black janitor pants, a plain gray shirt, a warm smile. He raised an eyebrow. "I don't think I'm exactly gala material." "Neither were any of the people who said yes to me when I first started," Natalie replied. Half an hour later, Ezra was in a borrowed tuxedo. He looked uncomfortable, stiff, but still, somehow, Ezra. They walked into the ballroom together. Heads turned, whispers flew, but Natalie held his arm tighter. The triplets were little stars, giggling in their tiny dresses, making faces during speeches, stealing shrimp cocktail when no one was looking. They ran between tables like they owned the place. Midway through the evening, the crowd quieted. Natalie stepped onto the stage. Her speech was expected to be about innovation. Instead, she began with a story. 3 years ago, my daughters lost their father. 6 months ago, they started losing themselves. And I was losing them too. Not because I didn't love them, but because I didn't know how to be there. She took a breath, eyes shimmering, and then someone came along. Not with a resume, not with connections, but with presence, with patience, and with a heart that didn't flinch. She turned to Ezra in the crowd. He didn't come here tonight as a guest. He came as the man who saved my family. Silence. Then applause. Ezra's hands remained in his lap. But his eyes were wet. That night after the gala, they stood alone on the penthouse balcony. You didn't have to say all that, Ezra said softly. Natalie looked at him. I didn't say even half. He turned, ready to walk away. But her hand caught his. I was afraid, she whispered. Of what? Of feeling this again. Ezra didn't move. But his silence asked the question. She stepped closer. You made me believe in home again. He met her gaze, not with surprise, but with something deeper. Recognition. When he leaned in, it wasn't fireworks. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, gentle, like two storms finally choosing to be still. Weeks passed. Life settled into something soft and sacred. Ezra no longer clocked out at 5 p.m. because he never really left. He moved in gradually at the triplets' insistence. Your room is right next to ours, they declared. He didn't replace their father. He never tried to, but he gave them something else. Stability. Story time, laughter, and a backyard where they built a treehouse together, wood by wood. Joke by joke. Natalie sometimes watched them from the kitchen, coffee in hand, heart wide open. The media moved on. But Natalie didn't care anymore. Her girls were smiling again, and one day, as they danced barefoot in the living room with Ezra spinning all 3 triplets at once, Natalie saw something she hadn't seen in herself in years. Joy. Not the kind that's posted on Instagram. The kind that grows in the quiet spaces. Then came the letter. It arrived in a plain envelope with a return address from Ezra's daughter's boarding school. She had written it as part of a class assignment. Letter to the person who changed my life. Natalie found it on the kitchen counter and read it aloud. Greater than Dear Dad. You always told me that I could break cycles. I didn't realize until now that you already had. You took care of me with nothing but your 2 hands, and now you're doing it again. For 3 little girls who think the sun shines out of your pockets. I know you're not a billionaire like their mom, but you're the richest man I know. And now she knows it too. I'm proud of you, and I'm proud of her for seeing what so many people miss. Love. Eden. Natalie wiped her eyes. So did Ezra. I didn't mean to pry, she whispered. I left it out on purpose, he replied, voice thick. I wanted you to know who I was, before all this. She stepped closer. I already do. One spring morning, 6 months later, the triplets stood at the edge of their newly planted garden, dressed in white, holding 3 small rings. Natalie, barefoot in a simple sundress, stood beside Ezra under the oak tree. They didn't have a wedding with gold or glitter. They had a promise. One of the girls leaned into the mic and announced proudly, we now pronounce them Mommy and Daddy and Ezra forever. The crowd, only close friends, a few staff, and Eden, burst into laughter. The billionaire didn't cry for the cameras. She cried because the janitor gave her back everything she thought was lost. Hope, a home, and a family.